I had always been an early riser. By the time 7:30 a.m. hit, I was usually up, mentally preparing myself for the day. But that day, just as I was getting up, my phone rang. It wasn't the usual work-related call or even one from a friend. It was Mark, my husband. Strange for him to call when he was just in the next room. I picked up. "Hello?" "Jessica, you need to move your stuff out of your room," he stated, without any warmth or greeting. Confused, I sat up straighter in bed. "Why would I do that? It's my room. Sarah needs it." His voice was firm, almost as if this wasn't up for discussion. I frowned. Sarah was Mark's niece, a 25-year-old who had lived a life of ease and reliance on others. She hadn't worked a day in her life, instead choosing to take from her grandparents and anyone else willing to give, including Mark. In her eyes, I was just the stupid auntie, a term she often used behind my back, though sometimes bold enough to use in front of me when she wanted to belittle me. However, to demand my room, this was a new low, even for her. Why does Sarah need my room? I tried to keep my voice steady, but it trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "She's moving in, and she wants that room," Mark replied, his tone dismissive. "But that's where all my things are. Where am I supposed to go?" I could feel the sting of tears, but I held them back. "Just find another room or put them in storage. I don't know, figure it out." I was in shock. After everything I had done for this family, this is how he treated me? Our marriage wasn't perfect. In fact, we had been sleeping in separate rooms for a while now. But to be told to vacate my own space in my own home for a girl who had shown me nothing but disrespect was a new low. I took a deep breath. "Mark, I am not moving my things. That's final." There was a pause. "We'll see about that." And with that, he hung up. The conversation left me rattled. I sat there for a few moments, trying to process what just happened. Our relationship had its issues, yes, but this blatant disregard for me, for our life together, was something I had never expected. And as the weight of the situation settled in, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this stand. Whatever game Mark and Sarah were playing, I had to be ready for it. This was my home, my space, and I wasn't going to be pushed around any longer. I walked through the front door after a grueling day at work, hoping for a moment of peace. But instead, I found Mark and Sarah sitting in the living room, their faces grim. It was clear that my refusal to give up my room had set things into motion. Sarah looked me up and down with a smirk, her arrogance palpable. "So, I heard you don't want to give up your room," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "That's right," I responded, my tone firm. "I live here, Sarah. That room is mine." Mark interjected, trying to play peacemaker. "Jessica, can't you just move your stuff to the guest room?" "Why should I? Why does she get my room?" I replied, looking from him to Sarah, who sat smugly, enjoying every moment of my discomfort. "Because she's family and she needs it," Mark answered, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. "I'm your wife, Mark, or have you forgotten that? I'm family too," I snapped back. Sarah laughed, her voice high-pitched and mocking. "Come on, Auntie Jessica, it's just a room. You can't be that attached to it." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "It's not about the room, Sarah. It's about respect. You can't just come in and demand things as if you own the place." She rolled her eyes. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. All you have to do is move your stuff. Is that so hard?" "Enough," Mark intervened, raising his hand as if to silence us. "Jessica, just move your stuff. This isn't worth the fight." I stared at him in disbelief. He was my husband. He should have been on my side. Instead, he was siding with a niece who had repeatedly shown disdain for both him and me. I felt betrayed. "Mark, I won't be bullied into giving up my space. Not by you, not by her," I said, pointing at Sarah. "This is our home, and I deserve to be treated with respect." Sarah laughed again. "Respect? From what I've seen, you don't deserve any." I was taken aback by her audacity. How had this young girl become so emboldened to disrespect me in my own home? "Sarah, you might think you can walk over everyone, but not me. I won't be pushed around," I said, with as much dignity as I could muster. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. This is getting us nowhere. Just move your stuff, Jessica. I shook my head. No, I won't. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. The three of us locked in a standoff, each waiting for the other to blink. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Sarah stood up, her face red with anger. Fine, keep your stupid room, but this isn't over. And with that, she stormed out, leaving me and Mark in an uncomfortable silence. I could tell this was only the beginning of our troubles. The next morning, as I prepared my morning coffee, my phone buzzed with a notification. A text message from an unknown number. I opened it, curious. You should have given me that room. You'll regret crossing me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I knew instantly who it was from. Sarah. I replied, trying to keep my cool. You don't scare me, Sarah. This is my house, and you can't dictate what happens here. Almost instantly, her reply came in. This isn't over, Auntie Jessica. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Just as I was trying to process this new threat, Mark walked into the kitchen. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes. What's wrong? I asked, showing him the messages. Look what Sarah's sending me. Mark looked at the screen for a long moment. She's just upset. Don't let her get to you. I frowned. This isn't just being upset, Mark. She's threatening me, in our own home. He sighed. I'll talk to her. But you have to understand, she's had a tough life. Losing her parents at a young age wasn't easy. I interrupted him. That doesn't give her the right to behave this way. She's an adult, not a child. Mark looked away, clearly torn between supporting me and defending Sarah. I'll handle it, okay? But the conversation was far from over. That evening, as I was settling into my room, Sarah knocked on the door. I opened it, and she stood there, her posture defiant, eyes cold. Listen, Auntie Jessica, I don't know why you're making things difficult. Just give me the room, and all of this can be over. I took a deep breath. I told you, Sarah, this is my room, my house. You can't come in here and make demands. She smirked. Maybe not, but I can make life very difficult for you. I looked her straight in the eye. Is that a threat? Sarah leaned in, her voice a low whisper. Consider it a warning. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The weight of Sarah's warning pressed on me. What was she planning? What was she capable of? And why was Mark so blind to her manipulations? The only thing I knew for sure was that I had to be prepared. Whatever Sarah had in store, I wasn't going down without a fight. Days melded into weeks, and each day seemed grayer than the one before. The walls of the house felt suffocating, and Sarah's smug demeanor was a constant thorn in my side. From leaving unwashed dishes in the sink to borrowing items without asking, she seemed intent on testing my patience. But nothing could have prepared me for the horror that awaited me on one fateful evening. Returning home from work, I immediately sensed something was amiss. The usually locked front door stood slightly ajar. Hesitantly, I pushed it open, half expecting to find a robbery in progress. The living room was untouched, but a trail of torn fabric leading upstairs caught my attention. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I followed the trail to my bedroom. The sight that greeted me was heart-wrenching. My clothes, years of curated outfits, gifts, and personal memories, all cut up and strewn carelessly around. The violation of my personal space was a feeling I couldn't describe. Jessica, what did you do? I heard Mark's voice behind me, dripping with accusation. What did I do? I turned, a mix of disbelief and anger. Your niece did this. Sarah appeared beside him, feigning innocence. Why would I ruin your things, Auntie Jessica? Maybe you did this for attention? Mark looked at me, his gaze colder than I'd ever seen. Did you do this, Jessica? Did you ruin your clothes to frame Sarah? My jaw dropped. You think I would destroy my own things? My cherished memories? Mark's voice grew harsher. Maybe you wanted a reason to kick Sarah out. My heart felt like it was shattering. The man I had once loved and confided in now looked at me like a stranger. I can't believe you'd think that of me. Sarah smirked from behind Mark, enjoying every moment of my pain. Maybe you should have just given me the room. None of this would have happened. I backed away, tears streaming down my face. I thought we were a team, Mark. How could you choose her over me? Mark's face was impassive. Maybe if you'd been more understanding, none of this would have happened. You brought this on yourself. The weight of his words was crushing. It was clear I had lost not only my clothes, but also my partner. The realization was devastating. That night, I packed a bag, knowing I couldn't stay in a house where I felt so alone and betrayed. I had lost the battle for the room, but the war for my dignity was just beginning. The weight of the past few weeks felt like 100 bricks pressing down on my chest. Every look, every word exchanged in that house, they all came rushing back. With my bag packed, I sat in the living room, the silence only interrupted by the ticking of the grandfather clock. As I waited for a taxi, the realization hit me. This wasn't just about a room, my clothes, or even Sarah. It was about respect, trust, and my place in this family. My phone buzzed, a call from Lisa, my best friend. "Hey, Jess," she said, her voice filled with concern. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I feel so lost, Lisa. I never thought Mark would turn on me like this." Lisa sighed. "Sometimes, people show their true colors when faced with difficult situations. Maybe this was a wake-up call." "You're right," I murmured. "But what am I going to do now? I've invested so much in this relationship and this house." "You need to make a decision for yourself," Lisa advised. "For your well-being and your future. Don't let anyone else dictate your worth." Lisa's words resonated deep within me. Mark's parents and Sarah had taken so much from me already, my peace, my happiness, and even my own space. But they couldn't take my self-worth unless I let them. It was time to reclaim it. Determined, I made my way to the bank the next day. As I sat in the financial advisor's office, I explained my situation. "I want to ensure that my assets are protected, and I need to know where I stand financially," I said. Mr. Harris, the advisor, nodded sympathetically. "We can definitely help with that. Let's review your accounts and see what we can do." As we delved into my finances, it became evident that I was the primary contributor to most of our investments and accounts. Mr. Harris looked up from the paperwork. "Mrs. Thompson, it appears that you've been the major breadwinner here. If you decide to divorce, you have a strong case for a significant portion of these assets." My heart raced. Divorce. The word felt heavy, yet in a strange way, liberating. Could I really take that step? When I returned home that day, Mark was waiting. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. "I went to the bank," I replied calmly. "I needed to review our finances." His face paled. "Why?" "Because," I began, taking a deep breath, "I've decided to file for divorce, Mark. I can't be in a relationship where I'm constantly belittled and betrayed." Mark looked stunned. "Jess, you're overreacting. We can work things out." I shook my head. "No, Mark. This is my decision. I deserve better." And with that, I took the first step towards a new chapter in my life, one where my worth wasn't determined by anyone else but me. A few days later, I found myself seated in the office of a renowned attorney, Miss Angela Reynolds. Her reputation for handling difficult divorce cases was what drew me to her. As I relayed the events that led to my decision, Angela listened attentively. "It's clear that you've been through a lot," Angela commented, jotting down some notes. "I've handled cases like yours before, and I can tell you, standing up for yourself is the best decision you could make." "I just want what's fair," I replied, looking out the window at the bustling city below. "I've supported Mark and his family for so long. It's time for me to protect what's mine." Angela nodded. "You have a strong case, Jessica, especially given that you've been the primary contributor to your shared assets." I hesitated, then added, "There's something else. I suspect Mark has been unfaithful." Angela looked up, her gaze sharp. "Do you have any proof?" "A private investigator," I began, taking out a folder with photos and notes. "I hired 1 month ago. The evidence is clear." Angela skimmed through the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This changes things considerably. With evidence of infidelity, the court is likely to view the case in your favor." Relief washed over me, but there was a gnawing feeling at the pit of my stomach. I had to confront Mark with the truth. That evening, I returned home to find Mark in the living room, surrounded by old photo albums. Memories of better times. "Jessica," he began, his voice shaky, "I've been thinking, maybe we can work things out?" I placed the folder on the coffee table, the photos facing up. Mark's face drained of color as he recognized the woman in the photos. "You've been cheating on me," I said calmly, my voice devoid of emotion. Mark's eyes darted between the photos and me. "Jessica, it's not what it looks like." "Save it," I cut him off. "I've known for months, Mark. I just wanted to see if you'd ever come clean." His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Why didn't you confront me sooner?" "I hoped you'd change," I replied. "But instead, you chose Sarah over me. You let her destroy our home, our trust." Tears streamed down Mark's face. "I'm so sorry, Jessica. I never meant to hurt you." I shook my head. "Sorry doesn't change what you did, Mark. It's over." And just like that, the weight that had been pressing on my chest lifted. It was a painful revelation, but one that set me on a path to reclaiming my life. In the weeks that followed, the legal process was a whirlwind. I felt like a regular at Angela's office, diving deep into the finances and property that Mark and I shared. Mark's actions not only severed our emotional connection, but also jeopardized our shared assets. The evidence of his infidelity and Sarah's destruction of my personal belongings were prominent factors in the proceedings. One morning, I received a call from Angela. "Jessica, I've managed to get a court date. It's sooner than I expected, given the circumstances." "That's great news," I replied, a fire igniting within me. I was ready to see this through. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was filled with tension. Mark sat across from me, looking defeated and tired. Sarah was also present, her arrogant demeanor unchanged. The judge, a stern-looking woman with sharp features, looked through the files presented before her. "It seems the evidence is quite clear," she said. "Infidelity, financial misconduct, and deliberate destruction of property." I caught Mark's gaze, looking for any sign of remorse, but there was only emptiness. Sarah, on the other hand, was fidgeting nervously. Angela, clear and assertive, presented our case. "Your Honor, my client has not only been the primary breadwinner, but has also financially supported Mr. Mark's parents and his niece, Sarah. She's been through emotional trauma and has lost personal belongings due to the actions of the defendants." Mark's lawyer tried to present their side, portraying Mark as a loving husband who was misled by Sarah. But the evidence was overwhelming. After what felt like hours, the judge gave her verdict. In light of the evidence presented and the actions of Mr. Mark and Miss Sarah, the court rules in favor of Miss Jessica. I exhaled deeply, feeling a wave of relief. It was a victory, not just legally, but also personally. I was reclaiming my life. Outside the courtroom, Sarah approached me, her bravado gone. "Jessica, I'm sorry," she began, her voice quivering. "I never thought things would go this far." "Your actions have consequences, Sarah," I replied coldly. "It's time you learned that." Mark tried to catch my attention, but I walked past him. There was no room for reconciliation. I had given him chances before, and he had thrown them away. It was time for both of us to face the outcomes of our choices. Retribution, it seemed, was finally mine. Spring's rejuvenating spirit mirrored the changes in my life. Gone were the gloomy days in the big, suffocating house. Now, I enjoyed the city views from a modern apartment, a fresh start, and a place of my own. My morning routine was interrupted by a call. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen, but I had a hunch. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Jessica, it's me, Mark." I stiffened. "Why are you calling, Mark?" His voice, a mix of desperation and hope, came through. "Things have changed, Jessica. I realize now how wrong I was. Everything's fallen apart since you left. I was wondering—" "Get to the point," I said curtly. "I need you, Jessica," he blurted out. "Financially, everything's a disaster. Sarah took advantage of my bank accounts, ran up huge debts. We had to move in with my parents. They sold the house to cover her debts and now we're all squeezed together, constantly fighting over money. A bitter smile formed on my lips. So you're calling because you want help? Money? Not just that, he pleaded. I want you back, Jessica. I made a huge mistake. I took a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. Mark, while I sympathize with your situation, you made your choices. I've moved on, and you need to find your own way now. Before he could respond, another voice piped up in the background. Auntie, help me out just once. I promise I'll change. It was Sarah, her voice sounding very different from the arrogant and demanding tone I remembered. I sighed deeply. Sarah, I hope you find the path to change truly, but it's not my responsibility to fix the consequences of your actions. The call ended with a heavy silence. It was difficult, hearing their desperation, but I knew I had to stand firm. To rebuild myself, I had let go of the toxicity that once consumed me. There was no turning back. As the days turned into months, I immersed myself in my work, found joy in little things, and adopted a playful cat named Bella. Life had its challenges, but it also presented beautiful moments of growth and contentment. One evening, while reflecting on the past, I realized that despite the pain, those experiences shaped me into a stronger, wiser woman. I felt an inner peace, knowing that after every storm, a new dawn awaits. And as the sun set that day, I embraced my new life, grateful for the journey and the lessons it brought.